everyone. Today we're going to have a discussion about Nagorno-Karabakh, one of the longest lasting conflicts in the world that flared up again in September 27 after the Turkish-backed Azerbaijani attack on the Armenian population of Nagorno-Karabakh. After 3 failed attempts of ceasefire establishment, finally on November 9th, a ceasefire brokered by Russian President Vladimir Putin was established in Nagorno-Karabakh. This document, this statement that was signed by 3 leaders, the leaders of Armenia, Azerbaijan, and Russia, leaves more questions open than answers them. It can be called a ceasefire, but it cannot be called a peace deal because too many problems still remained unresolved, and most importantly, because large parts of Artsaj territory have been put by this ceasefire statement under control of Azerbaijan. Today, we are joined by a distinguished panel of experts and the Ombudsman, the human rights defender of Nagorno-Karabakh, to discuss these and other important topics about Nagorno-Karabakh conflict and particularly its implications on the European peace and security. Because even though this might seem a regional conflict, its implications are huge on European stability and security. Let me introduce our honorable panelists. Artsaj Beglarian, the Ombudsman of the Republic of Artsaj, who has been doing with his small team a tremendous job of safeguarding, protecting the rights of the population of Nagorno-Karabakh. Thank you, Artsaj, for your work. Sean Riordan, Director of Chair for Diplomacy and Cyberspace of the European Institute for International Studies. Sean is a former British diplomat who has worked and who has taught classes in Artsaj and in Armenia at the Diplomatic School of Armenia. We are also joined by Pablo Gonzalez, a journalist and an expert in political science. And we will be briefly joined by Andranik Israelian. He has a PhD in history and is an author of 2 monographs. Andranik has written a monograph on the peculiarities of Turkish foreign policy during the decade-long rule of the Justice and Development Party during 2002 and 2012. He is a former public servant from the Ministry of Foreign Affairs of Armenia, and he will share his insights as well with us. Thank you so much, and I want to emphasize why I have asked you to join us, because all of you have visited Artsaj, and it's very important whenever any expert is doing assumptions, is talking about a conflict, that he has touched that ground, that he has had first-hand experience of the place that he or she will be talking about. So let us open the discussion. And yes, I hope it will be interesting for our viewers. First of all, it's a conflict. Usually it is presented as a territorial conflict, but it has, first and foremost, a human face. We know that the Karabakh conflict, the attack of Azerbaijan, has caused great sufferings to the civilian population, in general, to the peaceful population of Nagorno-Karabakh. Artsaj, from your perspective as the human rights defender of Artsaj, could you share us what is the situation now? Because there is an unfolding humanitarian crisis on the ground. Many people have had to leave their homes. Many war crimes have been committed. We have problems with the prisoners of war. The situation is really distressing. Can you share some insights? What is the actual situation now there? Okay, yeah. Pablo, maybe you can share some of your first-hand accounts on what was the situation like, because you have been there during the actual most intensive period of the conflict, and you have seen great many things that many of us haven't been able to see and witness.
The first that I want to explain probably is that we didn't have really that big amount of civil casualties, and this really all the potential for the humanitarian crisis was not achieved thanks to the really good organization of the Armenian people. Because how they help one to each other, how they organized they were. all the solidarity that was between Artsaj society and main Armenia society. So only because of that, the problems and the crisis that we had is really smaller than the potentially it have the potential, no, but still. A lot of people were evacuated. That's really great, especially the kids, the young people, they were evacuated. That permit like minimize the suffering of this population, but also a lot of population, no, a little bit less than a half, they were all the bigger part of the conflict in Artsaj with all the problems that they had. They for a lot of they don't have light, because Azerbaijan forces or Turkish forces, or both of them, they attacked some infrastructures. Some of this infrastructure, okay, they can be considered as double used infrastructure for military use, but some of them, they are really civilian targets. So I don't see the justifications to bomb that. No, we had the problems that. Even that the attacks were quite precise in some cases. In other cases, they attacked the cities really in the random way. So they were exploiting a lot of civilian houses, and only because of the good, let's say, self-organization of the Armenian Artsakh people, there were less casualties that it was potentially the way, no, because the people were sleeping all the time in the bomb shelters. That this also, it's really something very stressful. Pass weeks and weeks underground with this fear. Okay, the bomb shelters, they are not that comfortable as at home. Even that the people can prepare them, but still they are more cold places. They are with less, let's say, you don't have showers there, you don't have toilet proper. You need to go up to your home to do that. It was enough food, because again of this really good self-organization of the people, the solidarity, but still there were punctual problems, especially in cities like Hadrut, Martuni, Martakert, that they were under attack. So it was really problematic to transport there the first need, like medicines and food. And even that, the people, the volunteers, the military, they were transported. So I think that that was during the war. And now, something that really happened, and me, like my part of journalists, see it already a lot of times. We normally forgot the places after the war stopped, because we say, okay, there is no war, there is no more problem. But especially now, I think that this humanitarian crisis can be even more significant, because thousands and thousands of people, they lost their homes. It's not clear if they can recover these properties because, okay, we have the security warranty from President Aliyev, but for the moment, what is the feedback that we can see from the ground is really terrific. They are killing people, they are burning houses. So let's say that now I think that the international community, and especially about in this issue of human rights, must be more see the situation for more close and with more attention. Something that I hope Artak will explain us actually in the last days, what is the situation there.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, Pablo. And yes, Artak is back again with us. And I wanted to ask you to provide us, Artak, with an update of what is the actual situation, how many displaced people we have now, how many civilian casualties we have at the moment. Those are not pleasant numbers that you have to give an update on, but it would shed some light for our viewers how dramatic the situation on the ground is, and anything that you would find appropriate to share with us concerning the humanitarian situation.
Thank you. Do you hear now? I'm sorry. Rima?
Yes, we can hear you. Yes.
Okay. All right. Thanks for this opportunity. Actually, there is a lot to speak about, but I will answer your question only directly. Talking about the current situation, yes, it is humanitarian crisis in Artsaj because of many reasons. The first reason is because we have over 40,000 displaced persons or homeless persons uh, whose communities and homes are occupied by Azerbaijan. And it is over 27% of our entire population, which means that it is a lot for us. Some of them, or probably, I can't say exact number, but probably majority of them are still based in Republic of Armenia because they don't have any place to come here to Artsaj. Another part of them are now in Artsaj in different communities, and some of them are based in centralized places supported by government. Another part is based in some houses, homes, renting them with support of the government. And another part is living uh, at the homes of their relatives, their friends, or just acquaintances, supporters. But we have serious lack of housing conditions to in order to give homes to all of homeless people, even the part which is now here in Artsakh. So the first reason is this: we have serious lack of homes. The second reason is they have been deprived not only of their homes, but also everything, including their movable property and their clothes, documents, etc. And they need serious need of social support. There are already some programs by the government and some charity organizations, but still the need is quite high. Another direction or reason is post-war traumas that everyone has in Artsakh, but mostly the family members of victims, both civilians and also combatants, the dead soldiers and dead civilians, and also displaced persons, but I would say that everyone, because of the intensity and aggressiveness of the war, and because of the extent of war crimes, that everyone was target of those war crimes in almost all communities of Artsakh. And the fourth direction of humanitarian crisis is a large number of missing persons and captured persons, and the context, the information or propaganda context, which is too criminal context, provided by Azerbaijan on captured persons. We have still many missing persons that their bodies, I mean dead persons, that their bodies should be found in battlefields. We have hundreds of persons that are not identified, but the bodies are here under our control, but they are not identifiable. That's why we need DNA tests, and people are, I mean, their relatives are in high uncertainty. This is also a huge problem. And also there are large number of captured persons, both combatants and civilians, who are under Azerbaijani control. We have already more than 50 civilians and combatants captured returned to us, to Armenia and Artsaj, but almost all of them faced serious tortures and inhuman treatment there in Azerbaijan. But also in parallel with that, we have dead bodies or videos of civilian persons and combatants that they have been killed under Azerbaijani control when they have been captured after that. It means that they should be protected under international humanitarian law, but Azerbaijan killed them, tortured them, beheaded them, I don't know, willfully killed both civilians and also soldiers, including wounded soldiers. And there are many videos and photos and also witnesses on those crimes. I guess these are the main directions and reasons of humanitarian crisis here, but for sure there are some other directions and parts too.
Thank you so much for the update, Artak. There are two more questions I would like to ask you. First of all, there has been some information that Azerbaijan is now prosecuting 4 of its soldiers, but none for those decapitation videos. I think 2 of them are on the accounts of destroying graves, and 2 of them for mutilating dead soldiers. Do you believe that Azerbaijan, the Azerbaijani authorities, are able anyhow to provide security guarantees, as Pablo mentioned as well, to the population of Artsaj, or these are just, they are making a show of prosecuting some people, but in fact, are they able to provide guarantees, security guarantees to the people of Artsaj? And my second question will be, what was the reaction of international bodies, especially international human rights bodies? Because we have oftentimes spoken about the problem of so-called gray zones from the perspective of human rights, because human rights monitoring mechanisms didn't want to visit the gray zones or conflict affected zones because of some political concerns. Do you feel the negative effects of that on the actual situation, how they are related, interrelated?
The answer of the first question is no, and the second question is yes. Why no? Because it's quite propaganda show by Azerbaijan, but also they are trying to create legal basis for further arguments in international arena, and including at the European Court of Human Rights. And they understand that they should explain what they did in order to punish the criminals. And they took some slight cases and organized this show. But there are hundreds of videos and photos more brutal, but nothing has been done by them, including some of those photos have been verified by Bellingcat, by BBC, Reuters. Just yesterday, Guardian also published an investigation on 2 beheading cases with both technical and also some proof-based, evidence-based, and witness-based verification. And in both videos, civilians are brutally being beheaded. And there is no investigation by Azerbaijan, including on the case of willful killing of 2 civilians. The video was published on October 15 and investigated by Bellingcat and BBC. And there are many, many other videos. In some of them, there are identifiable Azerbaijani soldiers, I mean their faces. But again, there is no reaction. And I'm sure that the results of this prosecution will be quite false. And even if they say that these guys are prosecuted, I'm sure that uh, they will be free and they will be encouraged and awarded, at least hiddenly, by government agencies and officials. And the hatred policy, Armenophobia policy in Azerbaijan is quite strong, especially in this period. And they are encouraging both the government and the society this atmosphere. And this is only the curtain just for outsiders to show that the government is polite and the government protects, ensures human rights for everyone. But there are lots of reasons to say that there is nothing behind it. And together with Armenian Ombudsman, we published a report on Armenophobia in Azerbaijan during the wartime. Before that, in 2018, Artsaj Ombudsman published the first report on organized hate speech in Azerbaijan. And if you are interested in more details, you can check those reports. If you want, I can share with you. And answering to the second question, I would say that the international community bears full responsibility for this humanitarian crisis and for war crimes, because Artsakh has been fully isolated by the international community, and from the international community supported the isolation policy of Azerbaijan and accepted the blackmails of Azerbaijan, because of which there was no official visit by executive bodies of any state to Artsakh. There was no official visit by organizations, international organizations, including monitoring bodies, both UN and Council of Europe and others. Even in the case when Artsakh is under their mandate, because both Armenia and Azerbaijan are members of Council of Europe and UN. Besides, both of them and others have many resolutions and statements on so-called gray zones, that human rights should be protected, monitoring bodies at least should have free and unlimited access to all gray zones. But again, they politicized this issue and didn't visit Artsakh. And because of this isolation and because of the lack of international efforts to protect human rights in Artsakh, and also because of the absence of preventive measures for war activities or war preparation by Azerbaijan, and also on hate speech in Azerbaijan for many years. That's why Azerbaijan felt free and felt encouraged by the international community. And that's why Azerbaijan thought that there is no monitoring body and nobody can professionally and independently, objectively record the human rights violations and war crimes in Artsakh. And it's not accidental that during the war, for a few times, international journalists especially have been targeted by Azerbaijan. And there were some statements by the Azerbaijani Foreign Ministry urging or demanding the international journalists not to visit Artsakh without Azerbaijani permission, because they saw that international journalists are the only institution to cover independently and professionally the war crimes here. Overall, that's all. But I would say that because of the failure of international community too, we had this war. At least we had the extent of these war crimes and these consequences. And international community should do now at least everything to break the isolation of Artsaj, to visit Artsaj, and to have branches here, programs here, even if they don't recognize our independence. Without recognition, they can do everything, because international law gives that opportunity. Engagement without recognition principle can work, if they have the political will. And also they should do everything for both restoration, rehabilitation of Artsaj, but also for prevention of new war crimes or new crimes against Artsaj people, because the risk is too high. That's all.
Thank you so much. And because you raised such an important thing, because these days everyone is following the news, everyone is following social media. We are watching war directly reported from places where we have like conflicts. And I want to ask Pablo, as a professional journalist, what would be your estimation of the coverage? Because I have been talking to many European friends, and maybe then Sean could add, as someone watching the situation outside of Armenia, watching from Europe, because I have been asking many people and they had no idea what was happening like at the immediate vicinity of the European Union. What was the general atmosphere? Did you meet any obstacles when reporting? And what was the correlation of, like, let's say, traditional media and freelance journalists? Because we saw many great freelance journalists in Artsaj who were covering from the hotspots that everything was happening there.
This is really, it was really a very peculiar situation, like all of this year is, because probably the Azeri authorities cannot choose a better moment to do that. I don't know if they did it because they were studying and it was planned from before, but we had from one side, we have the COVID pandemic. With this pandemic, a lot of journalists, they cannot move. It was really more difficult to move because you need to take that COVID test when you arrive to Armenia. This is from one side, but okay, this is something that something sometimes happens. You can afford it. But the other thing, and this probably is most important, is that it was a lack of interest from the bigger media. Because, for example, I covered similar conflict, because it's also post-Soviet space and with some similarities of Donbass, and the interest was quite bigger. It was really quite bigger. It was more TV presence. This time, it was no interest at all, because I spoke with other journalists, colleagues from Spain especially. They told that it was from one side, probably there were some pressures from Turkey, from Azerbaijan, to don't cover that, to don't show what is happening. But from other, there was really a lack of interest from the main media. I don't know why, probably because of the the COVID is everywhere in the media. We also had the USA elections, that it was something really massive and eat a lot of media space. So because of that, of these two questions, the COVID directly, because it's a little bit harder to travel. For example, the journalists based in Russia, that normally they cover this area, they cannot move out from Russia because the Russian authorities, they told them to stay inside of Russia, to don't travel that much, so they wouldn't spread the COVID. So they have difficulties for that. Other people didn't want to come. There was probably not that much experts that know this area from before. So it's harder to come and make parachutism. That you arrive, and you start to work without know nothing, and also that it was no interest. There were the bigger agency. There were Reuters, AP, AFP. I was working there for EFE, for other medias. So I will not say that the coverage was not good, but probably in other conditions, without the elections, and especially also without COVID, it will be quite bigger, because it was really a war in the middle of in the border of Europe and in Asia, and very sensitive area. I cannot say why this lack of interest, because only that I clearly see is the US elections and the COVID, that they make this issue, probably even also by numbers, because the Artsaj population is a little bit less than 150,000 people. And if we talk in numbers, for example, the migrant crisis 2015-2016 in Syria, there were a million of people. So also this, let's say, small numbers, and it's terrible, not that we will speak like that in the actual war, that more than 100,000 people is small number. So probably also that make that this conflict it was not that important in the main media agenda.
Yeah, I think I'd agree with Pablo. There was very little interest in Europe in what was going on. And I think that's historical. I worked in the British Foreign Office in the 1990s dealing with the siege of Sarajevo, which coincided with the siege of Stepanakert in the first war in Nagorno-Karabakh. And the siege of Stepanakert was infinitely worse than the siege of Sarajevo. And yet it never featured in the Western media, not once. So I think we can combine the facts like COVID, we can combine US presidential elections going on, other things going on, with a historical disinterest in Nagorno-Karabakh and in the problems there. And I would say that in part, this is the fault of Armenian diplomacy. I think Armenian diplomacy has not been sufficiently proactive on the subject of Artsaj. The one Armenian ambassador I know who has been very proactive and is extremely good on social media is, I'm about to get his name horribly wrong, but Tigran Makcheyan, who is the ambassador in the Baltic Republics. And I don't think it's accidental that the Baltic Republics came out very early in support of Artsaj and in support of Armenia during the war. Elsewhere, I think Armenian diplomats were notable by their absence. And I think the other area where perhaps Armenian diplomats were a bit complacent, but is the Armenian diaspora. I was struck by the lack of interest among the Armenian diaspora. And that, again, I think reflects a lack of interest in Nagorno-Karabakh. The Armenian diaspora is much more interested in the Turkish genocide in 1915 and has not taken such great interest in Nagorno-Karabakh, and so they weren't out on the streets in the way that you perhaps might have expected them. But I think the sad thing about Nagorno-Karabakh, about Artsaj, is that it's rather like Neville Chamberlain said about Czechoslovakia in 1938. It's a small country a long way away about which we know very little. And unless you already knew about it, you weren't going to find out about it this time.
Yes, partially. In a way, yes. Because there's lack of interest. We explain, and this is also what you mentioned about COVID, about U.S. elections. Maybe we can, if we shift the angle of our discussion and go into the details, why this conflict started. The exact same reasons that you enumerated maybe would be valid point when arguing why this conflict started, why the escalation started at this very point. But it is true that even though there was even in diaspora, in Armenian diaspora, there was some activity, things started developing really, really rapidly and in a very large scale, and let's say not unexpected, but in a way unexpected manner, that mobilization of the public attention was not probably organized in a suitable manner. So Yes, indeed. Unfortunately, sometimes the scale, the number of people matters when we speak about conflicts. But one thing, maybe before shifting the angle to the reasons and the reasons of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict and its implications on the European peace and security, one thing that I would also like Artsaj to comment on, because you mentioned about the property, the private property, that people are being deprived of their property, that Azerbaijan is not guaranteeing neither their rights to life, neither their rights to property, to liberty, anything. Could you speak a little bit about the cultural heritage that was left there, the Armenian cultural heritage, because this is a very important point, because we see the deliberate destruction of Armenian cultural heritage that is part of universal cultural heritage. Would you comment?
Yeah, sure. Firstly, let me inform you that I'm finalizing a report on cultural heritage, and also I'm showing some crimes, some examples, how they are damaging our cultural heritage. I would say, based on our calculation and our experts' conclusions, over 4,000 cultural monuments, movable or immovable, have been remained under Azerbaijani control as a result of both war activities and handover of certain territories. Among them, over 100 at least, now we are finalizing the numbers, are churches and cathedrals, and very old ones, including coming from 4th century, 5th century, and also the medieval time, 11th, 12th, 13th century. And they are all Armenian heritage, though the Azerbaijani side tries to falsify the history and the culture of those territories, saying that they are Albanian churches, cathedrals, or monuments, but they can't even explain in that case how Armenian letters are written on the churches. And there are many witnesses and proofs, including by historians of those times, that there are Armenian monuments and cathedrals, etc. And only Armenians live there in those centuries. But it doesn't matter. I mean, people, whoever know the history of this region, they quite understand that Azerbaijanis are fully falsifying the history of those cultural heritage. But there are, even in that case, that they are saying they are Albanian churches or monuments, we see how they are treating those monuments in general, and destroying the churches, vandalizing, and making photos and publishing those photos to their society and getting welcoming reaction by them. It also shows that they don't consider those monuments, those cultural heritage, as their own, as sorry, as some people who say that we are continuing the heritage of Albanian people, though they don't have ethnically any connection with Albanians. Once our report is ready, we'll publish that and you will see the details there.
Thank you so much, Artsaj.
Welcome.
probably now we can pass to the second part of our discussion, and I would ask Andranik and Sean, what are your thoughts? Why this conflict, like why Azerbaijan decided to attack now in September? What were the conditions, and what was the role of Turkey in the escalation, in the recent escalation of the conflict? Thank you.
Can you hear me? Okay, so I'll very briefly, first of all, my greetings to everyone. I'm really glad to see you because I haven't seen you, Rima, and also Sean for quite a while. And I haven't seen Artak for ages. But if he's still online and he listens to me, I want to say that hats off before him. He like Artak is a person who I personally admire. And though a few years ago, Artak wrote an article saying that the time of heroes has passed, but I consider him to be a real hero to Armenian society and also international society. And to begin with, I have been calculating that Azerbaijan will start a war in coming years, and if hadn't revolution occurred, probably it would have started in 19 or again 20s, because the balance has shifted in its favor long ago, and it was apparent that it's on the verge of unleashing an aggression. But I remember when the pandemic just erupted, and then when every country got into lockdown, and Armenia declared a lockdown officially. I was drinking tea and thinking of myself that this is a really good opportunity for Azerbaijan to unleash a war, because there is a pandemic and every country is concerned with its own problems. And so for me in March, it was apparent that coming months will be highly likely for Azerbaijani attack. And unfortunately, I was right. And when we come to Turkey, since I've written my PhD thesis on Turkish foreign policy, I have to tell you that I have to make it very clear that the current ruling elite in Turkey, AKP party, has very deep Islamic roots. And when reading Davutoğlu's articles and monographs, it became quite apparent to me that this new elite in Turkey is very pious, very, very Islamic. And the worldview of these guys who are ruling Turkey is totally different from that of secular people. Just a few examples of the way of their thinking. For many occasions, Davutoğlu has declared that the only times when Balkans and Caucasus and Middle East was peaceful was under Ottoman rule, meaning that these people perceive international order to be Ottoman-centered. They have this Ottoman-centered or neo-Ottoman worldview. And in terms of Islam, I remember Erdogan in 2008 invited Omar al-Bashir, who was a wanted criminal for genocide, charged for genocide, and he invited him to Turkey. And furthermore, he said that in Islam we cannot commit a genocide. And I think he wasn't lying, in the meaning that he personally believed in what he said. There are another examples of which show the way they perceive the world. On another occasion, Erdogan said, "Excuse me, they even call me in Armenian." This is just showing to what extent these people alienate themselves from international what we perceive normalcy or like human rights and another agenda. And what I claimed in my thesis, which I also published as a monograph in Armenian, was that the Europeanization agenda was extremely domestic oriented and very short-term agenda for AKP. The reason Erdogan started this ambitious EU accession process was because it was the only way to get rid of all the military tutelage. He used these Europeanization laws and regulations in order to get rid of all these the guardians of Kemalist secular rule, secular generals, and as soon as he got rid of this secular military elite, he was free. He had this free hand to act, and he jumped back. And also interestingly, in 1996, Erdogan said that democracy is a car; you have to use it to reach your destination and just throw it away. So basically, this is the way he acts. But also ideologically, what explains Turkish attitude is that the Islamist elites, basically Muslim Brotherhood, who were the strongest opposition forces in Syria and also at some point ruled in Egypt. Turkish AKP is perceiving this Muslim Brotherhood, which is considered in many states, in many Muslim states, as a terrorist organization. Erdogan perceives them as an offspring, as one branch of AKP. So, to a certain extent, ideologically, Erdogan and his party feel affinity with many Islamic parties and organizations, which, according to the law in some countries, are outlawed as terrorist organizations. So, for me, personally, it was no surprise that Erdogan used these terrorists against Armenia and against Artsaj, because ideologically, Erdogan, by speaking about terrorism, he perceives just like Kurdish PKK and not these other terrorist organizations which act in the Middle East. And also, what was striking to me was, and I want to make this point very clear. To me, one of the reasons that international community failed to address Nagorno-Karabakh issue is because the democracy or the fashion of democracy has passed its heyday, and now democracy is not as fashionable as it used to be in like early 2000s or early 1990s. And it's very tragic to see that when you compare to Western response to Russian-Georgian war to this conflict in Nagorno-Karabakh, it's very tragic to see that two highly authoritarian countries attack a nascent democracy, and yet there is no proper Western response, whereas there was a high hope in Armenia, especially among Armenian youth and young civil society, that the human rights matter. And this will have, to me, in my view, this will have a very long-lasting impact on the way Armenian society develops and civil society, because the idea of human rights, the idea of justice, and idea of just everything what is considered to be like decent and right and moral was highly discredited within the Armenian society, and people feel that they were left alone, and even they did not get a single moral support from at least official Europe. Furthermore, when you see the official, at one point officially European External Action Service made a statement about Armenians' attack on Ganja, whereas it was a retaliation when Azeris attacked Stepanakert. And when you see that Azeris shell Stepanakert, and there is virtual silence on the part of Europe. And on the other day, Europe officially feels concerned about Armenians attacking Ganja. It's very, very hypocritical, especially when you feel that you are a country with a lot of freedoms, with a lot of European values, and you see that the freedom and democracy, nothing matters. It doesn't matter if you have free elections or if you have a neighboring country which hasn't elected anyone since 1993. It's like 27 years there was no election in Azerbaijan. And you feel that this democratic international or democratic solidarity has waned. It does not work, and we have to take this into account. And thirdly, I would like to stress another thing that unfortunately Turkey felt that international community can tolerate its actions against Armenian people 100 years after the genocide. So the same thing wouldn't, we can't imagine Germany attempting any harsh measures against its own Jewish people, Jewish citizens, because it would immediately evoke very, very tragic memories of Holocaust. But during the war, Armenia's territory was bombed with bombs made in Turkey. But still, you see that international community generally did not specifically address Turkey, and just these statements were generally very, very calm, calling for third countries not to intervene in the conflict. And the Armenians learned the hard lesson that they are left alone, and democracy and human rights and justice do not matter. And also Turks learned another lesson, that they are free to act again, even against the people against whom they committed the genocide. And international community is very busy with its internal strifes and pandemic, etc., and other agenda. So so the strategic culture of both Armenia and Turkey, and also in Azerbaijan, will learn these lessons, and those lessons learned, unfortunately, are not very benign for both Armenia, Turkey, and Azerbaijan, and also for international community. Thank you.
John, and if you could, before starting, I'm sorry, but if you could put also the Karabakh conflict, the situation, the role of Turkey into the puzzle of Eastern Mediterranean, and how do you see them connected together from the perspective of wider European security? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I'll comment first of all, I think, about the inevitability of an Azerbaijani attack on Nagorno-Karabakh. It had to happen simply because the Aliyev regime has to justify the money it spent on arms. It's spending an enormous proportion of Azerbaijan's oil revenues on up-to-date modern weaponry, both from Israel and from Turkey. It also has to distract attention. The economy in Azerbaijan is not going well. Oil revenues are collapsing with the oil price. And the Aliyev family has stolen so much of Azerbaijan's oil wealth that it needs a distraction to distract attention from the fact that most Azeris are still poor despite the massive oil wealth of the country. It's always been striking for me that whereas in Armenia, following the war in the 1990s, the refugees are rehoused and reintegrated into society, in Baku, they were left to live in a railway siding, as something that you could show to foreign journalists as a consequence of the war. And this is a country that's oil rich. So all of this lies behind the need to justify, to distract the population. But I think key is Turkey. And I think Andonik is absolutely right. Turkey, and it's not just in weaponry. The Turks have provided crucial weaponry for Azerbaijan, particularly in terms of drones and other autonomous or semi-autonomous weapon systems. But more than that, it's doctrine and tactics. The Turks have learned a great deal, both fighting in Afghanistan with the NATO forces against the Taliban and fighting in northern Syria. And this different kind of doctrine, this different kind of approach was deployed very effectively in Nagorno-Karabakh in a way that the Armenian and the Karabakh forces weren't able to react. They were still using rather old-fashioned Soviet doctrines or Russian doctrines, Russian equipment, and it was shown that this simply was not able to stand up to the Turkish approach. And if you add in the use of Syrian mercenaries, who made up for the lack of enthusiasm, shall we say, that has been seen in the past in Azeri infantry, all of that was crucial. And I think, as you say, we have to understand that in a broader geopolitical context in which Turkey is challenging a whole series of countries. We have the problem in the Eastern Mediterranean, where there is a confrontation between France and Turkey. But Turkey also has problems not problems, but is following a very aggressive foreign policy in Libya. It's a very aggressive policy in Syria. It's not just a question of confronting Greece, Cyprus, and France in the Eastern Mediterranean. There is also confrontation with countries like United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia. We're seeing a complete geopolitical realignment in the Middle East, with the United Arab Emirates and other Arab countries recognizing Israel. Saudi Arabia has not recognized Israel yet, but it will do probably when King Salman dies and Mohammed bin Salman becomes the new king. And this alignment is often spoken about as an alignment against Iran. It's actually an alignment against Turkey as well. That Turkey is trying to, Erdogan is trying to be the leader of the Sunni Muslim world. And that in many respects is a much greater threat for countries like Saudi Arabia than Iran. Iran functions only among Shia communities. Turkey potentially is challenging the leadership of Saudi Arabia, leadership of the United Arab Emirates among Sunni communities. So there is a broader context of conflict. I think the European reaction that Andronik complained of, he's quite right. As you know, Rima, I was a British diplomat, so concepts of justice and ethics and human rights don't generally cross my mind. We're a rather more cynical bunch. But I think we do have to also bear in mind the geopolitical divisions in Europe. Whereas France is very much in confrontation with Turkey, Spain has an enormous financial exposure to the Turkish economy. Germany, for its own reasons, wants to maintain good relations with Ankara, primarily because of migration and refugees. And Italy is on the same side as Turkey in the confrontation in Italy, where in effect you have a proxy war between two European Union members, Italy and France. So that really paralyzes the capacity of Europe to respond. But also gives some indications to Armenia for the future that it should be looking towards France, but it should also be looking towards the United Arab Emirates and Saudi Arabia, and possibly taking advantage of their realignment with Israel to find new friends and new allies in its confrontations with Turkey.
Thank you so much, Sean, for your insights. Well, in fact, what Andronik mentioned, I wanted to come to that, but he already mentioned, and you somehow touched the issue as well. Well, even if we do not look at it from the perspective of human rights and democracy, from the ideological side, if we look at what is happening right now in Nagorno-Karabakh and the reaction of EU and specifically of EU members, you somehow already explained to it, but an interesting point that I really wanted to make, and I think that should also be used by Armenian diplomacy, that's something to push on, because Azerbaijan is now negotiating. It has already largely negotiated, and it's finalizing its new strategic partnership agreement with the EU. And days ago, I think it was 20-something of October, when President Aliyev made one of his statements. He said, he used this expression that the new treaty with the European Union gives me a basis for launching a war and for securing the territorial integrity of my country. I think the silence of the European Union, because the methods that President Aliyev is using, well, it's still a matter of value, but bringing terrorist fighters, jihadists, and putting them in South Caucasus, close to the border with Iran, is also a security concern that European states should be taking more seriously, I believe. And in that sense, yes, France is somehow isolated, and it doesn't find any real support among its European partners. We shouldn't also forget about the Russia factor. And we shouldn't also forget that Turkey is a NATO member state that has largely, we didn't have hostilities on the territory of proper Armenia, but we know that civilian settlements on the territory of Armenia were targeted as well, while Armenia is a member of Russia-led CSTO. And it's a part of a bigger confrontation. This is something that can grow into some unpredictable risks. When President Biden comes, lots of things might change in the region. From that perspective, how you see possible developments?
Well, I think,
Pablo, you can add as well.
I don't know if you were in one of the classes where I discussed Nagorno-Karabakh in the diplomatic academy in Armenia, but one of our conclusions was always that you could not trust the Russians, that the Russians play their own games in the Caucasus and will play both sides off against each other. And at the same time, Russia is trying to maintain a relationship with Turkey, largely because it hopes to break up NATO. And it was interesting, the last NATO summit 2 weeks ago, Mike Pompeo launched a savage attack on the Turks for their recent behavior, including Nagorno-Karabakh. And there was a very aggressive exchange between the Turkish and the French foreign ministers. So within NATO, there is a major crisis because of Turkey. And the trouble is that many NATO countries, many European countries in NATO, are desperate to cling on to NATO because they don't have the military capacity to confront Russia. And so from the point of view of their own security, they see their own security utterly dependent on NATO, and they're terrified that if Turkey leaves NATO, it will break up the alliance altogether. So there's that short-term concern about their own security. I think in general, in terms of what does this mean for the Caucasus, most European countries could not care less. It's a long way away, it's not their problem. And it's interesting that the Baltic republics do support Armenia because they're very conscious of being small countries being threatened, and you have a very, very good ambassador there.
Yes.
I think Armenian diplomacy has to improve dramatically. It's been very passive. I've not heard Armenian ambassadors getting out in the media, effectively lobbying countries. You can't lobby when the crisis hits. You have to be lobbying for years ahead. You have to be developing your influence networks years in advance of a crisis. Turning up at the foreign ministry the day your city's being shelled is too late.
Yes.
And that to me suggests that Artsaj diplomacy needs to be much more integrated with what Armenia is trying to do. And I think simply look at a country like Spain, where I live. Spain buys oil and gas from Azerbaijan. Spain is financially exposed to Turkey. And Spain dislikes the idea of countries like Artsaj because of the implications for the Basque Country and Catalonia. And in fact, it's interesting that the Basque Country has good relations with both Armenia and directly with Artsaj. I've been in a conference in San Sebastian in the Basque Country in Spain with Armenia Alexandrian, the Deputy Foreign Minister of Artsaj. So I think we've got to understand the European context. I think Armenia's got to follow more aggressive diplomacy. Azerbaijan certainly does, but don't depend on Europeans coming to help you, because they won't. You need to, I think Armenia needs to understand what the general geopolitical realignments are, and look much more towards countries like Saudi Arabia, United Arab Emirates, and others who have good reasons to be opposed to Turkey.
Yes. Paolo, maybe you could share your views on how you see the developments and how you see the impact of the conflict and the behavior of Turkey in general on European security.
Well, first, I wanted to speak about diaspora, because Armenian diaspora had really, at least the Spanish-speaking, really big intervention in the conflict. They helped the journalists, the people on the ground, what they can. Another thing is probably the let's say the Armenian global influencers, no, that even in Armenia, probably they will expecting more from there. I don't know, I will speak, we can say even the Kardashians, no, people with millions and millions of followers, they can make quite more public diplomacy that they made it. It's probably somebody can discuss that, but their influence on this time was not too big, no. We can speak about, System of a Down or other Armenians in the USA that they were more active, but probably not enough for what was expected. From other side, speaking about the Armenian diplomacy and European Union, I think that Armenia must clarify to itself what they want and where they are going, because they are part of the Russian security association. So European Union and NATO, they are not, there is not the responsibility, let's say directly. Even the economical balance between European countries and Armenia is not that big. So European Union, first, we can criticize really a lot their foreign action, and second is that they are not exactly welcome in this case. They are welcome now that there is a crisis. Everybody is asking what to do, but before they are not. Nobody's giving them this importance, and Armenia must decide if they want to still with Russia, because I clearly see in the Armenian society this both ways. No, from one side, for continue as it was, and from other side to change this their orientation, geopolitical orientation. They were asking a lot, where Russia is, where Russia protects us, but Armenians, they also ask a lot of European countries to recognize Artsaj. But I think that first Armenia must clarify what they want to do, if they want to recognize Artsaj or not, and not asking the foreign diplomacy to do something that they must do first. This is from the Armenian, about the Armenian part, because I think that even the coordination between Stepanakert and Yerevan was not enough. Let's say, it's really. I will not explore more this question, but it's to explore and to really to analyze with this conflict what happened and which are the reasons of this the lost, or at least temporary lost, of all these territories. And from the perspective of Turkey, yeah, it's really not so understandable why European Union and NATO partners, they are giving to Turkey all this freedom of actuation, Syria, Libya, probably because still quite recent, the migration crisis. So Turkey always can open again this door, of migrants to European Union, and this will probably in the case of now of COVID can be really something very problematic from one side, and from other side, Turkey is clearly off of any future plan of the European Union. something that it was not, let's say, 15, 20 years ago, no, when it was even one of the candidates to enter the European Union. Now it's clear that Turkey is off of that. So probably we need some time to redefine this security issue. And I agree also about the Armenian diplomacy that was not enough working properly, because, for example, countries like Ukraine, they clearly support Turkey. But also is I think that is a little bit of realpolitik. When the money and the good relation, it means more than not even any moral consideration, because Armenia is a 3 million country, Turkey is a 81, 82 million country, Azerbaijan is a 10, 11 million country. So we had potentially 90 something million people against 3. That's also a question that we need to take now in consideration. Days after the signature of this, let's say, permanent ceasefire or peace or whatever we can call it, because it's a bit strange. It was from Russia. They sent to Turkey the first nuclear reactor for the first Turkish nuclear plant. So it's the business, and these relations are really bigger than probably any consideration more. And also we need to ask probably the President Pashinyan about what it was his strategy to resolve this country, or at least don't give it to this stage, because when he arrived in 2018, he was promising one thing, and what happened is something really different. So it's really, as you say in the beginning, is really we have more questions now than answers after the conflict, because it's not clear how this territory will live and how the diplomacy will, let's say, we deal with that, and they will deal, for example, with this. For me, the direct threats that the President Aliyev told that some of the Armenian cities, they can be considered historical Azerbaijan. No, I think that he told even Yerevan. So these real direct threats, we need to deal with that. But the European diplomacy is not there, and I think that is. We cannot wait for this European diplomacy to arrive there, because I think it will not.
Absolutely. I do agree with your point, Paolo, that we cannot wait for the European diplomacy to come, but we need to start working, and we need to start providing our vision, how, the Armenian vision and the vision, for example, of Greece, how they see it, because Greece is a member of the European Union. They have also many questions regarding the Turkish expansionist policy. But what I think it's still from the perspective, let's say, of European peace, of European security, because we, at the end of the day, we live in an interdependent world. And in this, our shared European space, we have tried to create more or less, because let's not forget that, for example, Armenia and Azerbaijan and Turkey, even if they are not members of the European Union, they still are members of the Council of Europe. They are members of the OSCE, the Organization of Security and Cooperation in Europe. And we are part of a larger European family. And in a way, we have created the rules of this interdependent, let's say, larger European society. And one crucial thing that we see, how it would be a big word to say that the world order is somehow changing. But what happened? Look, 3 ceasefires were negotiated before November 9 by Russia, by France, by United States, the co-chairs of the Minsk group. Those are members, permanent members of the UN Security Council. Azerbaijan and Armenia would say yes, they would go back home, and Azerbaijan would resume hostilities. And Turkey would say, if the conditions on the Azeri side are not fulfilled, then we are not going to follow the agreements that we have reached. In a way, this is a very dangerous signal to the world, and also to European states, to the United States and to Russia, that Turkey and Azerbaijan are states that are ready to disregard their calls, their really concerned calls, anytime they find it appropriate. Secondly, if we accept as given the results, the current state of play of Nagorno-Karabakh, of what happened in Nagorno-Karabakh, then we are opening doors to our, like, how, from the perspective of European states, how they are going to regulate their relations with Turkey, with Azerbaijan. The new agreement is going to be signed with Azerbaijan. You disregard your obligations under international law, and we have to accept as normal, or we have to criticize. Because even now we have this 9th of November ceasefire statement, but we know that Azerbaijan has violated the ceasefire agreement of 1994-1995. And former Russian ambassador Kazimirov, who has negotiated a lot, who has been very much involved in 90s in the negotiations process of the Nagorno-Karabakh conflict, he made a very valid point. If you do not hold Azerbaijan accountable for the violations of the former agreements that he has done, or any part, or even if it would be Armenia, if you do not hold accountable for the violations that they have done, what guarantees do you have that they will continue observing the new agreements that have been reached? So in that sense, yes, I again insist, and here I share your opinion, that the November 9th statement on a cessation of hostilities doesn't guarantee any peace unless, and here I add, international community, for the sake of its own relations with those countries, insists on Azerbaijan and Turkey holding their commitments under international law. And from that perspective, I think, and I do believe, that European states and European Union have to be more vocal, because part of that expansionist policy that involves Nagorno-Karabakh also touches Greece, touches Cyprus. We know Bulgaria has been mentioned in the plans of President Erdogan, and even Georgia. Georgia and Iran. They are the two states that are in the region, but probably the situation that we have at the moment is also a threat to Georgia, even though Georgia has been the proponent of, let's say, territorial integrity doctrine. And but we know that whatever is happening, the Russian presence, the terrorists that we have stationed there is also somehow clashing with our own interests. This will be very interesting to see the developments, how it develops, and what would be the reaction of European states. Would they add up to December 11th sanctions that European Council adopted against Turkey, and also to the sanctions that United States imposed on Turkey for buying defensive system from Russia? And my final question to all of the speakers, I know that Artsaj had to leave. To you all, what would be your advice to the future of Nagorno-Karabakh, to the future of Artsaj, let's say? Well, Pablo, you already expressed your opinion about the recognition issue. Sean, if you could share your views, what would be your advice to the future?
I think Pablo's right. Armenia has got to decide what it wants to do and where it wants to go and where it wants to go in relation to Artsaj. You cannot ask European countries to recognize Artsaj when Armenia does not recognize Artsaj. It's an unreasonable request in terms of diplomacy. I think also there is a really big decision coming. Is Armenia going to accept the current situation? Is it going to go towards a permanent peace agreement with Azerbaijan and Turkey, which I know has been suggested by at least one Armenian member of parliament? Or is Armenia going to maintain the ambition of retaking the territory lost in Nagorno-Karabakh? And that's a very fundamental decision. One could imagine an agreement whereby, a permanent peace agreement, whereby Armenia accepted the current line of control as a permanent border in exchange for normalizing relations both with Azerbaijan and Turkey and opening the Turkish-Armenian border. I think my problem with that is I don't think Armenia would ever get enough concessions to make it viable, and I don't believe that you could trust either Turkey or Azerbaijan under their current government. But if Armenia is not going down that path, Armenia is going to go down the path of hoping one day to recover this territory, then it's got to radically rethink its foreign policy. It's got to radically rethink its diplomacy and how it organizes its diplomacy to be a far more proactive diplomacy and public diplomacy. And it starts to need thinking very strategically about the whole range of weaponry. In the modern world, it's not just the military that fights, it's information operations, it's cyber operations. And in all of these areas, Armenia has, although it has potential to develop capabilities, its actual capabilities are far less than Turkey or Azerbaijan.
Paolo, maybe your last comments.
It's really a hard moment that Armenia really needs to decide what to do, have a clear plan. It's something that for the moment I don't see that Armenia by itself have a clear plan. And when you will have a real clear plan, try to do it. Because if Armenia want to recover these territories, probably the own Armenian sovereign state will need to change something or be more closer to Russia or broke these ties with Russia, whatever. But something that is will change probably the status quo of the proper Armenia. And from other side, Armenia cannot, I say it again, cannot wait for others to do what they must do, because in Spain, for example, as here really well mentioned, it's the question of Basque Country, Catalonia. But from security issue, also for Spain is more important, for example, Morocco or Algeria, the south flank of the NATO, that Ukraine before and now. Ukraine at least have border with European Union directly. Armenia, Azerbaijan, no. Turkey, yes, but Turkey is another issue and is member of the NATO. Still, there are Spanish troops in Turkey protecting their airspace. So it's a question to Armenia. Armenia, I think, that need to stop a bit, sit, think what to do. And for the moment, I don't see this clear position, not even with Pashinyan or against Pashinyan, no. But when you will have clear what is the future that you want, start to work in that, and probably in that moment, the European community, European Union, or international community can intervene more to help with these plans.
Thank you so much. We are running out of our time. My final remark before expressing my gratitude to you for joining us. Yes, indeed, it's a very new situation for Armenia. Long before it has been decided, and the politics of Armenian politics has been that they don't recognize, because they don't want to do any unilateral actions that would undermine the negotiations process in the framework under the auspices of OSCE Minsk Group co-chairs. But now we have a totally different reality, and we have to reevaluate our positions on the recognition, how we stand on the recognition issue. But that doesn't mean, for example, what we saw from the French Senate, the resolution that they adopted, they show a cross political spectrum consensus that this issue is in fact something that European countries can also be pursuing, because they might understand the effects. Because let's not forget that the situation around Iran is also becoming quite complicated. The radicalization issues in Europe are also becoming quite complicated. And this is somehow interrelated what is happening in the region, because from long-term perspective, we don't know yet how the change in the balance of power in the Caucasus will affect on Iran, will affect on Turkey, and will affect on further Turkish expansionist politics. Let's not forget that the Treaty of Lausanne, that is defining modern borders of Turkey, is reaching to its 100th anniversary in 1923, and we know the love affair with symbolism of Turkish politics. We saw what happened 100 years ago in Armenia, 1920 and 2020. So these are things that we need to be following very closely. And yes, thank you so much for joining us for today's discussion, for your insights and views. And let's hope peace will come to our homes, peace will come to the Caucasus, and someday we will be able to peacefully coexist in that small region that we call ours. Thank you so much. And to our viewers, do not forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Thank you.